kingdom consists of a great many things. You have the high lords and ladies with their maneuvering and politicking, always playing the Game of Thrones with daughters and wealth and any advantage, both real and imagined. You have the poor with their wants and needs and their jealousy for their lords, their patrons, be they gentle or brutish, the knights and their honor, or lack of it, the septons and sparrows of the faith, the singers and their songs of wars and romances. There are so many things to be accounted for, but all of this is as naught without a ruler who knows the art of ruling. If the gods were good, then every king who sat there on throne will be such a ruler. But these kinds tend to be rare, and the gods are seldom good. At best, the realm can hope for an inept ruler, and at worst, well, you don't need me to tell you about that, do you? The best of this was King Viserys Targaryen, who inherited a kingdom shattered by the reign of Maegor the Cruel. From the moment he declared himself king and rose up against his uncle, Viserys was a man made for rule. His enemies came before him expecting a boy king, a puppet at the hands of the Queen Regent and the small council. Instead, they met Viserys, not cruel like his uncle, not hesitant like his father, but a king in his own right. Thus did he appease the faith of the Seven and settle down the realm. Thus did he set up the precedents for Targaryen tradition. We don't talk about that. Thus did he build up the city of King's Landing and pave its streets. Thus did he build roads all over the kingdom, binding it into one. His rule is considered to be the most successful of the Targaryen line. His decisions to be some of the most sound. Looking back at this time, it all seems to have been a long summer of song and story, but it wasn't. There were many challenges and sorrows during this period, but the kingdom Viserys passed down to his successor was more stable and peaceful than at any other time in Westerosi history. All because of the man who held the realm together, and because of good Queen Alysanne. She was a queen who knew and appreciated the strength of women, both great and small, throughout the land, and she made sure to give voice to their concerns. Thus do we arrive at the subject of this study, King Viserys I Targaryen, he who inherited a realm at peace. But we know the nature of men. The unusual silence of peace always ensures that sooner or later there will be some sort of explosion. A successful reign is often followed by one filled with ineptitude or pure chaos and anarchy, or so the histories will have us believe. I shall leave it to you to judge and see what kind of a ruler King Viserys turned out to be and what did he make of the realm. So let us turn our gaze to the year 74 AC. By all accounts, a good year. By this time, King Viserys had held the throne officially, since he came to his majority, his manhood, 16. He had held the throne for 24 years. By large, the kingdom had healed from the cruel reign of King Maegor, Viserys' uncle. The bastard who is remembered as Maegor the Cruel. Viserys had done a lot to heal the wounds, and things had settled down. Viserys and Alysanne had a large family. Shall we call it that? A very large family, with children who just covered all the bandwidths in the range, from the good kids to the rebels to the ones in the middle. But the eldest son of King Viserys was Prince Aemon. He was the Prince of Dragonstone. He was the one who was said to succeed Viserys. A great prince, I'd say. He was a very studious, very good, respectable person, if you will, who had similar ideals as his father. Look out for the little guy. Do as much as you can to improve the realm. King Viserys was a king who was good at building roads and just making things better. Anyway, Aemon was the one who would succeed the throne upon Viserys' passing. Now, Aemon had a brother, and this guy's name was Balon. And Aemon and Balon, ever since childhood, they had been really, really close. Just think of the closest siblings, the ones who think of, I guess, Fred and George Weasley. Just really close brothers who treasured each other. Balon was the more warrior of the two. He was the one who was winning townies, these jousting competitions. He was the one who was better with the sword and such. He was the warrior of the two, but he was fiercely loyal to Prince Aemon. Whatever it was said that whatever Aemon did, Balon would do it not long after, because it's like these stories you hear of. Once this baby started walking, this other one just looked up and said, I have to walk too, and aped the brother. And yeah, it was basically following in the other's footsteps. It's actually curious about most of Jaehaerys's children, that they usually did that. They would hold on to their older siblings and be like, take me with you everywhere. But I digress quite a lot. The point is that in 74 AC, Aemon had wed the Lady Jocelyn. In keeping with the tradition, and he doesn't want to be far behind his brother. Prince Balon also wed in the year 75 AC. He married Princess Alyssa Targaryen. Targaryen traditions should not be questioned. The Targaryens are said to be more gods than men. That's the dogma that they spread all through Westeros. But so, Balon wed Alyssa Targaryen. The bride was 15 years of age, and the prince was 17, 19, somewhere within that range. If you remember very well, Jaehaerys and Alysanne had married at a similar young age, but unlike their parents, these two didn't wait. They consummated the marriage the very same day. And the bedding was a source of many rumors throughout the palace. Rumors, or rather, I'd call it gossip and snickering of ladies behind their efforts to produce a child, because I don't know why all the Westeros women are just, I guess it's just inbred into their culture that you need to produce an heir, you need to do that. So in 77 AC or thereabouts, she gave birth to a boy. They named him Viserys and presented him to Jaehaerys, the king. This is Viserys Targaryen, the subject of this video. Now, later on, they would have another son, and this boy they would call Daemon Targaryen. From a very young age, Viserys was said, this is how the masters described him, just a chubby kid who was happy. He's not moody or anything. He's very vibrant and very charming. We don't know much about his childhood or anything, but a lot of things were happening during this time. Remember, Jaehaerys' reign, though many look upon it as very stable, as this ideal period, there were still many challenges. Diseases still ran through Westeros. People died. Many of Jaehaerys' other children died. It wasn't all happiness and good things. There was the instance with Princess Saela, and the death of so many children. But this is the environment that Viserys grew up in, with a king who set his sights on doing as much for the realm as possible and being very smart about it. Later on, Viserys. A fun fact about Princess Alyssa, just to give you an idea of the kind of person she was. A few weeks after she gave birth to Viserys, she climbed up on her dragon and gave them a ride through the skies, giving them a taste for what it feels like to be a dragon rider. And when she landed, Viserys, people are worried, obviously. You can't take a baby up in the skies on a beast of flame and fire. But when she landed, Viserys was chuckling and he was, I enjoyed that a lot. She did the same thing with the Daemon 2 weeks after he was born. So she was a true Targaryen. Unfortunately, she died several years later when she was giving birth to her third child. Okay, she gave birth to the boy. They named him Aegon, but she became very weakened after the pregnancy and the you know after the birth, and she died a year later. And the boy Aegon did not survive her long. He also died later. Like half a year after she died, the boy died. Of course, Balon was saddened. He had truly loved his wife, and their exploits were well known all over King's Landing. But he held close his children, Viserys and Daemon, and loved them. As kids, Viserys and Daemon were also very close. Daemon was, it's almost a similar trajectory as their father. Daemon was the more warrior of the two. Viserys was chubby. He was okay with life. He was fine. Daemon was the warrior of the two. He was, yeah. You know about Daemon. We'll talk more about him later on. Now, what happened is that Viserys came to claim a dragon of his own. He was 16 years old. This was in 93 AC. So Viserys, 16-year-old, he has just become a man according to these people. He has become an adult. So he goes off into the dragon pit and claims a dragon, and guess which one he takes. He mounts Balerion the Black Dread, the fiercest and greatest and most legendary of the Targaryen dragons. Balerion was the dragon Aegon the Conqueror rode on when he conquered Westeros. This guy was old. He was big as heck, very very big, monstrous. You've seen this thing, what you're seeing on your screen in the House of the Dragon trailer. This is Vhagar, and Vhagar he is not as old as Balerion was. Balerion was even bigger than this, gigantuan. He was a monster, 300 years old or so. In fact, this was a dragon that had seen Valyria at its apex. Before he was born long before the doom of Valyria. So he was brought to Westeros by Daenerys, and he came to Westeros with Daenerys and the Targaryen family when they came to Dragonstone. He stayed there for the 300 years it took before Aegon decided to conquer Westeros, and he has lived for this long. The guy was old. So Viserys mounts this big dragon. He heads up into the sky, and then he realizes that Balerion is just too old. He can't do this. So the only thing that Viserys manages to do is to circle King's Landing thrice, and then he lands. And then he says he had wanted to take Balerion to Dragonstone, but he was just too old. Balerion died the next year, in fact. His skull is going to be shown in House of the Dragon. He's legendary. The fact that Viserys claimed this dragon and at such a young age, I think there is something involved in claiming a dragon. It's not as simple as just entering the dragon pit and taking your pick. I think there is something that has to happen in your mind. You have to have the will and control that, so that you can, I guess, dominate over the beast and submit it to your will. So that was that. Further tragedy fell upon the Targaryen family in the years to come. The king and queen quarreled. I guess the first tragedy was when Prince Aemon, the heir apparent, died in Perth. There was this war in Essos, sort of a not a war really. The free cities of Essos are often squabbling. They fight for a few years, they sign a peace treaty, then they break it and they fight once more. So the same thing was happening in Maya, and one faction lost, so they came to Essos. They came to Westeros trying to escape, and so they tried to carve out a little kingdom for themselves in Tarth. So obviously, Prince Aemon was sent there to quash that idea. I mean, generally, when you're a king, you can't just let anybody set up shop next to you. But by ill fortune, he died. It was a stupid accident, just a stupid way to die. The man who was shooting at them was aiming at the Lord standing by Aemon's side. Then the arrow missed, and the wind just shifted it such that it hit Aemon straight in the throat. When word reached King's Landing of the prince's death, everyone was just so shocked because Aemon was well loved. Balon was mad and angry, and he flew over to Tarth and he destroyed that. He killed everyone there. Got revenge, I guess. So when he came back to King's Landing, everyone was mourning, and King Jaehaerys had to make a tough call. Who will succeed him now, since the eldest son was dead? Some people, including Queen Alysanne, suggested that Aemon's daughter, Princess Rhaenys, should be the one to succeed him. But Jaehaerys thought about it, and he thought that the throne should go to a son. And since Aemon had had no children, he appointed Balon as the successor. Alysanne was mad. She was so angry at this because she told him, if you think that a woman has nothing to bring to the throne, don't ever take my counsel again. And she was mad. That was the cause of their first quarrel. That was the cause of their first quarrel. The first or the second, either of those two. Anyway, she was so pissed off at him. But Jaehaerys ignored that and appointed Balon as the Prince of Dragonstone. Obviously, the people were mad. The people mourned Aemon, but they also loved Balon. They called him Balon the Brave. So most people just accepted this, and they're like, okay, the realm is still in good hands. But then the stranger was not done with them. Balon also died. One day he was out hunting. No, it's not the same thing as what happened to Robert Baratheon. He was out hunting, and then he had a stitch in his side, and he was like, I need to rest. But when they returned to King's Landing, he slowly got worse and worse, and the Maesters tried to save him, but he died. When they opened him up and did an autopsy on the body, the cause of death was stated as a burst. I think his stomach lining had burst or something. So now Balon was dead, and King Jaehaerys was in even more of a fix because now things were complicated. Who would succeed him? See, the eldest son had died, and his child Rhaenyra, had a claim to the throne. Balon had died, and so his children also had some claim to the throne. And chief amongst this was Viserys, because Viserys was the eldest son. So it looked as though there will be some conflicts, because this is what had happened. Rhaenys had married Corlys Velaryon. You know Corlys Velaryon, a legend, a man whose ambition was well known, and he was nothing to chaff at or to laugh at. So Corlys began gathering fleets and ships to defend Rhaenys' rights. But Viserys also had a supporter, his brother Daemon. You know Daemon, he's this rogue prince. Everyone loved him, and basically Daemon also started gathering an army to defend Viserys' rights. So Jaehaerys knew that he had to play this safe. So he called back another of his sons, Vagon. Vagon had gone to the Citadel to study, and he had become an H-Maester. Basically, the Maesters have this, how do I call them? The Maesters are the typical people who study at the Citadel and graduate, but there are those who go further and they become H-Maesters. They're like the most learned, and they are sort of like the leaders of the Citadel of Old Town. Now, Archmaester Vagon was a child of Jaehaerys, but not many knew about him. He's an interesting character. Read up on him in Fire and Blood. So Vagon advised King Jaehaerys to hold this great council so that the lords of the land would choose their next king. Between all these different people who had a claim on the throne, the lords would choose who they wanted to lead them, and the king would abide by their choice. So you know that ending in Game of Thrones season 8, where where Daenerys is killed and the lords of the land choose Bran the Broken to sit there on throne. It wasn't the first time that such a thing had happened. I know, I can hear you screaming at me that season 8 was never Game of Thrones canon. But yeah, so basically it's the same idea. The lords of the land choose who is going to lead them. So all the claimants to the throne began going to Harrenhal. Basically, it was this great meeting. You know, Harrenhal is the largest castle in Westeros. The largest castle. It's the only place that could hold such a meeting. The lords gathered, they came. Harrenhal became this big town. There was even a town of shanties and tents that sprang up in the area surrounding Harrenhal. Basically everything of import was happening in the area. Many people came to claim the throne. Lord Corlys Velaryon and Rhaenys came. They presented their claim. Viserys came and presented his claim. So the real choice was between these two. There were several other people, but forget about them. They just had weak ties to Jaehaerys. So the real choice was between Rhaenys and Viserys, the principle of primogeniture and the principle of proximity. Finally, the lords chose Viserys, and he won by a landslide. It seems most of them weren't comfortable with the idea of a queen, or with supporting the idea of family titles and such passing through the female line. Admittedly, it would have been a bit complicated, but they chose Viserys. He won by a landslide. Rhaenys and Lord Corlys were forced to abide by this decision, and that's how Viserys became Prince of Dragonstone and heir apparent. The king, well, he was now called the Old King, but these were the latter years, the waning of his reign. The king soon passed away, and Viserys ascended the throne. As King Viserys the First Targaryen, King of the Andals, the Roina, and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, and Protector of the Realm. The first act, or the first thing he did as king, was listen to a petition from his brother Daemon. So a few years back, Daemon had married this lady, the Lady of Runestone. But Daemon being Daemon, he had tired of this marriage and he just wanted out of it. So he came before Viserys and asked him to annul the whole thing and set him free. But for whatever reason, Viserys refused. But he did allow Daemon to come back to King's Landing. You see, he had been in the Vale living with his wife. get tired of that place. So Daemon comes back to King's Landing, and Viserys appoints him to the small council as it's funny, but he gives him the position of master of coin. So he's in charge of the finances. That doesn't work out. So Viserys, upon his ascension of the throne, the people loved him. They called him the young king, and he was a gay guy. He brought laughter and song to King's Landing. He delighted in the all these things you hear in songs about the good old days. He brought song and splendor to King's Landing. There were fools capering about. There were ladies at court. It just seemed like this very exciting time, and everyone was okay with it. He was very much the kind of king that Renly Baratheon, you remember that guy Stannis' brother, the kind of king that Renly Baratheon would have become. I should probably mention that at this point the king was already married. Jaehaerys had married Lady Aemma of House Arryn. Point of note, this was his aunt or cousin. I think she was his cousin. The bride was 11. The groom was probably, I don't know, 19. Anyway, Viserys was married by the time he took the throne, and he already had a child, a daughter, who plays quite a big role in later events. Rhaenyra Targaryen, that was her name. And Viserys really loved this girl. He treasured her a lot. I mean, he knew his duty. They had been trying to have a son for years. The Great Council of 101 AC had just cemented this principle of primogeniture, and that titles would always pass down through the male line. So a son was something of a necessity, and to this end they still made efforts. But he really loved Rhaenyra, and she was a bold, beautiful child. Most people in the kingdom, especially the singers, they loved to call her the realm's delight. Viserys appointed her as his cupbearer, I guess just to keep her close and to give her something to do. And then Viserys realized that he had made a mistake appointing Daemon as master of coin. So 1 year later, he shifted him to master of laws, because he thought that was more aligned to Daemon's character. But governance just bored this prince. Daemon was a warrior. The idea of just sitting down in a table or on a table, the idea of just sitting down at a table and discussing all these things, it wasn't in line with Daemon's character. Finally, Viserys appointed him as commander of the city watch. Now this was more aligned with Daemon. I mean, he really thrived there. There were rumors that the king's hand was behind this appointment. The king's hand was a guy named Sir Otto Hightower. Very powerful man, just by the name Hightower. The Hightowers they're an old family in Westeros, and they are rich. They're just below the Lannisters in terms of wealth. So they have a lot of power behind them. This guy had served King Jaehaerys as the hand in his latter years, and Viserys just kept him on as the hand so that things will be easier. And admittedly, Otto was a pretty good hand. He knew how to manage the realm and such. But for some reason, Otto and Daemon, they didn't like each other at all. Like, from the moment they met each other, they just didn't vibe at all. And Otto was afraid of what might happen if Daemon became the next king or something. Anyway, he just wanted to do as much as possible to curtail Daemon's power. And I guess he saw the small council as being a powerful place for Daemon. So he sort of whispered in Viserys' ear and told him, Daemon would love to be in the city watch. I don't know if this is true. These are just rumors. But if it is, I guess Sir Otto's plan backfired on him, because Daemon, once he was amongst the city watch, he reformed those guys. He gave them, equipped them with better weapons, made them more organized and disciplined, and he brought justice to King's Landing. He meted out really harsh punishments, and he brought peace to the city. But many people just whispered behind his back that Daemon really liked cutting off hands and such things, that he enjoyed it, which maybe he did, gallows humor and all that. But Daemon spent a lot of time in the poorer parts of King's Landing, in Flea Bottom, in the wine sinks, and in the whorehouses, but whatever. Many people started calling him the prince of the city, and he gained a lot of notoriety, especially amongst the common folk. Daemon was a very polarizing character. He's the kind of man that can inspire a lot of loyalty and bravery in a certain kind of man, and also inspire the absolute loathing in another kind of man. He's just interesting that way. That's why they call him the Rogue Prince. But anyway, Viserys' reign was settling down. Daemon was happy. The small council was taking care of things, and he was free to just rule and enjoy life and be a jolly man. Obviously, Sir Otto kept bringing up the matter of succession, but soon there was good news. Lady Aemma was pregnant. Well, we should call her the queen. Queen Aemma was pregnant, and Viserys hoped that it was a boy, so that this matter of succession will be settled once and for all. But when she gave birth, it's the tragic thing that happens to many ladies in Westeros. She gave birth, yes, and it was a boy. They called him Baelo. But then the queen died, and then the boy survived him by a day, so it was just this big tragedy. And so the king is grieving, and the King's Landing is also grieving. And then the king hears something. It's brought to him that Daemon, upon hearing the news, because honestly, there's no excuse for this. Daemon had been next in succession as long as Viserys didn't have a son. But once he had news that the queen was pregnant, and now that a son had been born, Daemon had been like, oh, now I'm second in line. And he went into Flea Bottom, and he was drinking and doing all such things. And then when news reached Daemon that the queen and her son had died, it was reported that he had toasted the air for a day and made, really, as in he's making fun of this boy who had died and making fun of Viserys' loss. Obviously, Viserys was mad when he heard this. He was angry. And Daemon just kept doing things like this, making stupid choices, I'd say. So Viserys' anger was stirred by this. And as soon as the grieving period was done, he decided that Daemon would not succeed him at all. He doesn't want his brother to sit there on the throne. So what does he do? He names a new heir, and I'm pretty sure Sir Otto had a hand in this. Because the Otto Hightower did not want Daemon on the throne either, and he had tried. He wanted them to place Rhaenyra on the throne, or rather to have her be the official successor to the king, at least until the king had maybe another son or anything. Just anything to keep the realm from Daemon's hands. So the king came out and he proclaimed that he had chosen a new heir, and it was his daughter, Rhaenyra Targaryen. Completely disregarded the principle of primogeniture and the ruling of the Council of 101 AC, just threw it out the window and said, this is my heir. And he summoned all the lords of the land to come and swear fealty to her. They knelt, they made the oaths, and they swore to protect her rights. And so it was settled. When Daemon heard all of this, he was mad as hell. He was like, no, you can't do this to me. He was so angry that he resigned his position as captain of the King's Guard and just left King's Landing. So, quick note. while in his days rampaging or just visiting all these in these houses in Flip Bottom, he had come across this woman named Mysaria. Mysaria was from, Lys and such places, and they had a thing going between them. By the way, remember that Damon is still married at this time. They had a thing going between them. So when he left King's Landing, he took Mysaria with him, and he went to Dragonstone. Something like a year later, Viserys hears that Daemon's paramour, is pregnant. She gives birth, and what does Daemon do? He takes a dragon's egg and puts it in her crib. Viserys is furious because the Targaryens really have a very tight hold on their dragons. You can't just give firepower to anyone. It will be a big disaster if there ever was a time when two dragon lords fought in Westeros, because they didn't want a rival house to possess this big power. Well, obviously something later on happens. There is infighting within the house, but that's later on in years that Viserys will never see. So Viserys is mad. He calls to Daemon and tells him to return the dragon egg and to get rid of his paramour and make sure he goes back to his wife. This is a royal decree. So Daemon is mad, he's angry, he's raging, but he obeys. It's a weird thing about Daemon. He always feels like he's doing all these crazy things, but whenever Viserys really pulls rank and tells him do this or do this, he always does it. He always obeys his brother. So Daemon obeys the king's orders, returns the dragon's egg. He sends Mysaria to Lys in a ship with the newly born baby, and he makes his leave and goes back to the Vale. Now, a tragedy happens, and then there is a storm. That ship sinks. It doesn't sink, actually. There's just a very heavy storm, so it's a terrible passage, and Mysaria's newborn baby dies. When Daemon hears about this, he's just so angry. He has a heavy heart, and his hatred festers for his brother Viserys. Sad, Back in King's Landing, things are settling down. Viserys has somewhat recovered from the loss of his wife and son. And then the Grandmaster Rancita, comes and speaks to Viserys and tells him, "My lord, you have a duty to the realm. You need to get married again. You're still young." The matter is brought before the small council, and they agree that yes, the king needs to wed again. Viserys agrees, and so they start looking at options. Who will be the next queen? The suggestion is put forward that the king should marry Laenor Velaryon. See, Corlys and Rhaenys had two children. The first was Laenor Velaryon. The second was Laenor. You can see the different spellings. The first was a son, the second a daughter. Now, because Rhaenys and generally his family had been passed over so many times, there was a bit of a rift between the Velaryons and the Targaryens. And historically, these two houses have been very close. They have been allies. So in order to heal this rift, it was suggested that the king marry Laenor and heal that rift, bring the two families together. And the Sea Snake is not someone you want to have as an enemy. He's a very powerful man. But Laenor was just too young, and Viserys didn't want to marry such a young girl, really. He agreed that he would remarry, but he chose to marry for love. Another woman had caught his eye. And who else would it be but Alicent Hightower, the Hand's daughter? They were married sometime later, and oh my goodness, Sir Otto was just walking very straight those days. When people were talking about his big head and his ambition and his pride, because the man had risen so high
at the wedding between Viserys and Alicent, it was said that it was a joyous occasion. Rhaenyra helped Alicent through the the rituals and stuff, and it seemed as though they were close. Good things were happening. Now,
Um, this has gotten too long. This has gotten too long. 43 minutes. So this is what I'm gonna do. Split it into 2 parts, and then you just look out for the second part. It's probably coming out soon. Okay? Yeah, just look out for the second part. Hope you enjoyed that. So yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe and tell me your thoughts in the comment section down below. I'll see you soon. Ciao.